Alright, so on my system the rendering finished in 36 minutes. Depending on your system it might be faster or slower, but anyways it's done, and let's go to Photoshop and open it up to see how we can improve it before calling it done. So go to Photoshop, hit File and hit Open, and go to the location where you saved it. I saved it in the Resources folder called Binoculars Raw. So select it and hit Open. I'll just zoom in a bit. And here in Photoshop I will walk you through the main things I usually do to my renderings. The first thing I like to do is to add a gradient that gives a bit more dynamic to the image. Right now it's looking a bit flat. The lighting on the background is quite even. So to help that look a bit more interesting, I create a new layer. Hit the new layer button down here, and then I go to the gradient tool here. Make sure that I have a gradient going from white to black, and I'm going with this linear gradient, and I drag it so that it starts with white where I want the brightest areas, and then it goes to black where I want the black or the darkest areas. So here it's important it's following the direction of the lighting on your scene. Okay, so when I have that, I go here to the blend mode and change that to overlay. And as you see right now, it's way too much. So I back that down, the opacity of the layer to often something like 10 or even less. But I think on this one we can go with something around 18 or 20. So it doesn't do much, but it still gives us the feeling of the lighting coming from this side and moving over here. So if we had put it the other way around, could work as well on this one, because we have the lighting from both sides. But I think for this one we're going with this direction. Okay, so never be afraid of trying the opposite of what you think it should be. It might sometimes look better, actually. Let's go with this and move on. What I do from here is to hit Shift-Alt-Command-E to create a new merged layer. On Windows it's Shift-Alt-Control-E, and that layer, I right-click on that and convert it to a smart object. And that means that I can always go back and edit changes that I do. So if I add any filter, it won't get baked into the layer. It will be put on top as a non-destructive filter. So the filter I add on this one is the camera raw filter, and I use it to do some basic exposure and contrast and brightness and so forth adjustments. The first slider I like to adjust in here is the one called clarity, and it adds some mid-range contrast, and it really helps to bring out some details. So if we zoom into 100% and slide this one up, you can see that the details start to become more clear, or they start to pop, to use a word that is used a lot. I think I will go with +20 for now. Then I go to the exposure, see how it looks if we bring that up a bit. I think if we bring it up to 0.7, that looks good. What if we increase the contrast a bit? Maybe actually I want that to go down a bit. We get some more details in the reflections in here. Highlights, I want it around here. So a trick is that if you hold Alt down while left clicking and dragging, you will get like a preview of where the colors start to bleed out. So right now here controlling the brightness or the highlight, nothing does that. But if I do it while adjusting the exposure, you see, for example, we get this part starts to come out. And For this particular image, it's not that useful because we can see that this is way too bright, but in some cases it's nice to know when the colors start clipping. Let's take this down. Let's go to the shadows. I want to bring that up as well. We get some more details here and in here and here as well. But be aware that you don't crank it up too much. You should do this quite subtle. I think I go with 13, the white, just trying to drag in either direction and see what looks the best. And remember to click it or to look at the image, not on the slider while dragging it, so you don't choose it depending on the number, but on the actual look of the image. And I think this is good. And then for the black one, I actually think that this is good. Might be a bit too bright now, so I will go with this. I think I like to do here is, especially for images with a lot of colors in it, is to go to this tab here and hit convert to grayscale. And in grayscale, it should look good as well. It should have the same amount of contrast as when you show the colors. So here we only really have one color, so it doesn't do too much, but it's a good trick to check if your values are looking right. So if it looks good in grayscale, it will look good with the colors on. Might want to adjust the vibrance, just add some more color, or yeah, +5 should do. So I'm happy with that, and I hit OK. So now we can see here, if we show and hide this new layer, we can see the difference, and it's quite good. And one thing I often do is to take the opacity down just a bit, because I tend to overdo some of these effects. So by taking the opacity down, we back it up just a bit. Next step I usually do is to add some glow or some bloom to the image. And to do that, I select the top layer and again hit Shift Command Alt E, Shift Control Alt E, and then hit Shift Command U, Shift Control U to convert it to a grayscale image. Then I right click on it and hit Convert to Smart Object. And here I go to Filter and nope, not yet. I go ahead and hit Control L or Command L to bring up the levels slider, and then I adjust these to make sure we only have the brightest spots here on the binoculars. I don't care too much about the background. We can mask that out afterwards. So now we have like the brightest parts, and then I hit OK. Then I go to the filter and go down to blur and go into Gaussian blur. Here I go with a value around 30 or 20 to 25-ish. You can always go back and change that because we did it as a smart object. So because we did it as a smart object, you see we have the filters here. We can turn them on and off, and we can always go into them and adjust them. Cool. So with this done, I changed the blending mode to linear dodge. And looks quite cool here on the binoculars, but we don't want all this stuff in the background to happen. So to get rid of that, I hold down Alt and go to this layer mask button and hit that one. So right now we got rid of everything. Then I take a brush, hit the brush button out over here, right click and select soft brush, hardness of 0, and then a size 200 seems to fit well here. And then, whoops, make sure the mask is selected. With a white color, I paint in the spots where I want the glow to be. So you can see here on the mask that we now have a white area, and that's the only place where this layer comes through. Let me just do that for the parts here on the binoculars, like this. And then I can always check this on and off and maybe go in and adjust the blur I like it to be rather soft, like this, and then I also adjust the opacity to take it down a bit. Great, like that. The next thing I usually do is to do some color grading. And as with most things, there are several ways that you can do that. One of the tools I usually use is the selective color. And you can use that to adjust different colors of your image. So, for example, I usually go to the blacks and adjust it a bit to add some colors into the black areas. And that helps to give this photographic effect. It's very rare that the black is complete black when you do images and stuff like that. So what I like to do is to make it kind of bluish with these numbers, and then I can adjust the brightness of the black as well. Maybe this. Then always uncheck and check it to see the changes. I think that is pretty cool. And then we don't have too many colors in here, but I can show that if you go to the science, we can adjust the colors of the lenses. So if we want it to be a bit more greenish, put some more magenta into it, take in some yellow. And you could do that with the other colors as well here if there were more in the picture. So I'm happy about that. And again, I take it down just a bit. Then I also usually add a curves adjustment where I go through each of the channels and maybe add some to the highlights, take something out. Just try to do some minor adjustments and trying to be real subtle about it. If you add in a point that you don't want to keep, just select it and drag it out from the graph. And it's not always working out. So maybe just undo it. And yeah, I don't think that in this case the curves adjustments do any good. So I will just delete that layer. Hit the backspace on your keyboard to delete that, or hit the trash can down here. Okay, so at this level I am close to being done with the image. Sometimes I do another merge layer, Shift Command Alt E, and hit Shift Command U, and that's Shift Control U if you're on Windows, and Shift Alt Control E to create the merged layer, and add it as an overlay to add some contrast to the image at a low opacity. Just helps to give a bit more contrast. We'll go with 8% in this one. And then I do another merge layer, Shift Command Alt D. And once more, I convert that to a smart object, and I go to the filter and add the camera raw filter. Sometimes I go to the lens correction first, because here you can add in what's called chromatic aberration, which is this effect that you get like red or cyan or yellow or blue fringe around the edges of your product, like you see here. It's something that happens on cheap lenses when you use a photograph, not a photograph, when you use a camera. But I think this is an effect that's sometime overdone and should be used with care. So maybe you could go with +30 and -30 just to add a subtle hint of it. Let's do that for this project. Sometimes I don't use it at all. But let's just do that here. And with that done, I go to the filter again, just using the same layer and going to the camera raw filter once again. Then I like to try to adjust the white balance just to see if it gives me something interesting. So here, get a warmer look, get a cooler look. I think that this cool looks quite cool. Cool looks cool. And the tint as well, maybe just a hint. Nah, this is good. Then I go to the detail tab and add some sharpening and make sure that you are at 100% when doing that. Make sure to look at the areas here where everything is in focus and add just a tiny bit. Don't go overboard with this as well. I think this is good. Then I go to the FX channel and add in some vignetting to focus the viewer on the object. So it adds like this dark edge. You can always adjust the midpoint, stuff like that. I just want to keep this real subtle as well. Could be something like this. And then I like to use the grain in here in this camera raw filter. I think it looks really good. And if we look at the part up here and just give it a big number, we see that we get this noise that looks quite photographic too. So I like to add in just a hint of that. Whoops. So something like 20-ish. That looks quite cool for this shot, I think. And with that done, I hit OK, which brings us back. And again, I always check and uncheck it to see the changes. Maybe, yeah, so here it doesn't help to take the opacity down because this lens correction filter with the chromatic aberration distorts the view as well. So we have to do this 100%. And I think it seems fine for now. If you didn't want to have this camera raw filter 100%, you should do it on a layer by itself. As a last step, I like to add this color lookup to see if it gives anything to the image, and it's kind of some filters that contains some contrast adjustments, some brightness adjustments, and some color grading. And I like to use these Fuji and Kodak presets, so I go through them and see if it adds anything to the image that I like. This is quite cool. This as well. This is also quite nice. And yeah, that's cool as well. So if I find something that I like, I choose it, and then I usually take the opacity way down. Then maybe create another one with this color lookup and choose. I think that the first Kodak was cool as well. Yeah. And then again, take that down. So this is before and after. So it's minor changes, but it gives something to the image. And with all this done, I will call this one finished. I don't want to do too much to the image. And what I usually do, like while doing the stuff or afterwards, is to give my layers proper names. So that could be gradient. This was contrast, brightness adjustment. This was some bloom, some color grading here. And that was just the detail enhancement using this grayscale image. Could yeah. And then we had this final adjustments. And again, these are saying what it is, the color lookup. And then I like to select all my layers, hit the bottom one, hit shift and click the top one, and then hold down shift while clicking on the folder. So we get all that nested in the same folder, and then I rename it to post. And now we can see everything before and after the post. Really cool. All right, so when I am done, I go to File, Save As, and go to a place on my computer where I want to put this, and I'll put it in the resource folder so you have it, and call it Binoculars post.psd. So we have the Photoshop file with the layers. So I can always go, that's good to have, so you can go back and do any changes if you take a new look tomorrow and think something looks a bit weird and want to adjust it. And then I also save it as a PNG with the color profile embedded as Binoculars post. So we have that as well. Hit OK. So that's it for the post-production. And it also wraps up this course. So I hope you had fun and you learned at least a trick or two while doing so. And I can't see what you create, so feel free to send it to me if you do something cool and learn something from this course. And thank you so much for supporting me and buying this course. Stay in touch soon.